Welcome to the Lean Out Your Business podcast, a show dedicated to helping entrepreneurs accelerate business growth and simplify success. I'm your host, Krista Grasso, and I've been working with businesses for more than 2 decades to help them lean out and optimize what's working while eliminating anything that's not adding value. So if you are ready to get more time back in your day, more profit in your business, and to do business differently, growing and scaling on your terms, let's dive into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Lean Out Your Business podcast. I am so excited today because today I'm joined by Hannah Nieves, and she was one of the amazing thought leaders and entrepreneurs that I met when we were on Necker Island, and we had so many incredible experiences together. So we'll be talking a little bit about that today, but the core topic and the thing that we're going to dive into, which I think you'll all be really interested in, is how do you increase your visibility through marketing and branding and PR? And because I know so many of you are multi-passionate, just as I am and just as Hannah is, are there any nuances or things that we want to consider when we have multiple brands or multiple things that we're passionate about and talk about? So it's going to be a juicy conversation today. I'm so excited to dive in. Hannah, I'm so excited that you are here.
Thank you so much for having me. I miss you so much. So I'm so excited we're able to have this conversation.
Absolutely. So let me tell you a little bit about Hannah, and then we're going to dive right into the good stuff. So Hannah is a multidisciplinary entrepreneur. She's a creative visionary and a voice of inspiration, recognized as an expert in marketing, branding, and PR. She is the founder of Hannah Nieves Consulting, Haus, and This Hudson Studio. Hannah has served hundreds of brands from across the globe, and she regularly talks about entrepreneurship on her top-rated podcast, Haus. She truly loves the work that she does, and she's passionate about being able to serve multidisciplinary founders. So that combination of what she's passionate about with her incredible skill is a lot of what we're going to be diving into today. But before we do that, Hannah, I have to hear from Necker Island, what were some of your top takeaways, top memories, those things that you just keep going back to now that we are back home?
Oh my goodness, there are so many. And it's so interesting because while we were there, I still have like one of the stones from the beach that I still keep at my desk every day to remind myself. That trip was on another level in so many capacities. But really what I took away, and this was during our conversation with Richard, like one of the last few nights, and it was around like building businesses that are much bigger than yourself and building businesses that are actually giving back to the community and supporting the world versus just looking at businesses from a financial, projection or an exit strategy. I thought that was one thing that I've actually never heard that before. I never heard that perspective. So that was a really powerful one. And the other thing too that I really took away from Richard specifically was that, he mentioned a line around like businesses are like buses, right? There's always another one. And that can be taken in multiple ways, but I think it's really powerful because I think sometimes we tie our identity to our businesses. And when you think about it, like, there are probably so many more businesses that we're going to be launching and creating over a lifetime and so many new experiences. So it just, granted, there's so many takeaways, but those are my top 2. And I came back just with like so much curiosity about like what we're doing.
Yeah, I love those. And I agree fully. And I don't know about you. I currently have 3 businesses as you do, but I am fully confident that these are not my last 3 businesses.
Mm-hmm.
I have had many over the years, and there will be many more to come.
Exactly. I think that's a beautiful thing. So it's just, there's so much opportunity out there.
Absolutely. So speaking of Richard Branson, right? I think that he is such an incredible example, and his Virgin brands are such an incredible example of PR and marketing and branding done right. I think there's probably so much that we can learn by the way that they approach things and the incredible success that they've had over all of these decades now. And so what do you think that we can learn from their approach? What do you think makes them as successful as they are?
That is a fantastic question. And, when you think about the Virgin brands, right? Like they're across so many industries, from, spaceships to airlines to gyms. I mean, he's built companies across so many different sectors. But what I love about Virgin Brands specifically is, number one, well, the brand itself. I mean, if you look at the brand, it stands out visually, from the bright red, color that they have. Also with their messaging too. That's what I really appreciate about Virgin brand specifically, is that their messaging is a little bit witty, right? It's a little bit cheeky, right? It goes against the norm. And I think too, that's not just embodied in the words that they're using, in their ads or on copy and things like that, but down to the way that people experience the brands too, whether it's going on an airline or going on one of the cruises. So I think that's a really powerful thing. And another thing that I've seen them do really successfully is that they go right when everyone goes left. So a lot of like their PR stunts and any of their campaigns have always been a little bit cheeky. They've been a little bit on the edge. And I think that's what makes Virgin Brands so different and unique, which, I mean, a lot of us can learn from. It's very different when you think about the Virgin cruise line that they have, right? It's a cruise line for no kids. Like, you cannot go on this cruise line if I think you're under the age of 18. And they specifically tailor their marketing around that. So I think it's really interesting to see how a brand of that size can still have that personality in its brand. And I think that's why people love it so much.
Yeah, and you said the key word there, personality, because I think that's something that they do so well is the consistency across the brand personality, regardless of what they're talking about, because they do have such diverse brands. I mean, they cross pretty much every industry and sector out
Mm-hmm.
there, but that personality is consistent no matter what it is that they're talking about, even if the topic and the words are different. And that's actually, I mean, it seems so beautiful and eloquent when they do it, but that's really hard to actually do within a brand. And I think that's something that you help your clients with, isn't it?
Mm-hmm, exactly. And I think it's powerful to see a brand of that size implementing, right? Because I mean, they have thousands and thousands of employees, but I mean, it comes down to, it's almost like the sensory experience, from whether it's you're reading their copy, you're seeing their brand, you're speaking to, the attendant who's checking you into their cruise line or to their airline, right? Like, everything is this sensory experience. And that's something that is really powerful if you're wanting to differentiate yourself and your company, but also leave like a lasting legacy too, because people remember how they feel at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And so that takes me into, right, we just talked about a lot of the things that they did right, but what are a lot of the things that people do wrong, right? So as we're approaching our own marketing and our branding and we're looking to expand through PR, what are some of those mistakes that you see entrepreneurs and smaller businesses making really consistently?
Ooh, there's a few, but I will say, like, the number one thing is trying to fit in. Looking at, this is what XYZ company is doing in their marketing, in their positioning, which means if they're successful, we're going to be successful. But what happens, you end up diluting everything that you're doing just by assimilating to that brand. So that's the biggest one. The other one too is really not setting the foundations, especially as you're scaling your company to, multiple 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures plus, right? Like, you have to have strong foundations in your brand. And that's really what's going to take you to that next level with building a solid marketing plan and PR and visibility plan. You have to know like what you're putting your stake in the ground for, like what are you rallying around? And that's what's really powerful, because at the end of the day, people feel connected to companies and brands where they can share that common mission and value.
Absolutely. So much gold in what you just said there. And so, how do you, with intention, do that? How do you set out and look at, this is my brand, this is what I stand for, this is what I want to put my stake in the ground around? And then, how do you build your marketing and your PR approach around that?
I love to take the sensory experience. There's a fantastic book by Pauline Brown called Aesthetic Intelligence. If you've never read it, I definitely highly encourage you to get a copy. I love her specifically, but as it relates to building a brand, I like to take the sensory approach. So it's not just, what does your brand look like, right? So if you're a consultant, a coach, an advisor, agency owner, whatever it is that you do, right? It's not just about the pretty photos that you have or just about the services, right? It's how you're communicating that. It's your differentiator. So when you think about your brand, it's like, people visually see you, when they hear you, right? Your copy, whether it's verbal or nonverbal. When it comes to senses like touch, right? Like, what does your brand look like in the physical form? Maybe there's incredible welcome gifts that you, or milestone gifts that your clients experience. So thinking about all the different senses and how your customer feels when they experience your brand. So starting there, and then getting really down to the specifics of like, what does your brand stand for? What's your mission? What's your vision? And what problem are you solving in the marketplace? Those key 3 things are really, really powerful because that's what's going to propel you in the future. And then we add on all those other really sexy things like your brand shoots and your colors and your fonts and things like that. But you really have to get really grounded on why you're here, first off, and where you're going.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point because as entrepreneurs, as natural creatives, as visionaries and ideators, we love the fun, sexy side of things. It's just the way that we are, right? It's like, ooh, I can do a new photo shoot. Great. I get to look at pretty logos and pretty fonts. And all of that can feel really important, and it is, but it's only important when you have that solid foundation in place.
Yes.
So I'm so happy that you start with that because I think it's really easy to distract ourselves with all of the fun, sexy, kind of cool side of things, but lose the overall reason for why we exist and the way we're really going to connect with our customers.
I think that's really, really powerful because, like you said, a lot of people run to getting their websites rebranded, doing the really expensive photo shoots, right away, there's nothing wrong with that, right? You do want to have your own type of brand presence, but you have to know what you stand for first. Otherwise, you're just going to continuously reinvest these things over and over and over, but feel kind of lost on like where you're positioned in the marketplace. And that's a big thing where people come to me mostly, it's due to positioning. It's where they stand within the competitor landscape.
Yeah, and today with so much competition coming up as well, especially I know a lot of my listeners are coaches and consultants and in the service-based and agency space. And more every day, there's new coaches cropping up and new people, claiming to be consultants cropping up. And it
Mm-hmm.
can feel like it's hard to stand out. And there's a lot of copycatting going on. And so what do you recommend? How do you help people when they first come to you and they're like, listen, I need to address my positioning. I feel like I've lost my ability to stand out. Are there any key tips or things that you encourage them to do?
So one of the things I actually look at, and it's funny that you brought this up too, because I've noticed that as well. And I've also had an influx of people who have been coming to me and they're really feeling misaligned with what they're offering. And it comes down to the way their brand is positioned, but also some of their offerings too. Some people think, okay, just because this person told me I should do XYZ, I should do that. And then you start to feel this resistance. And when you feel resistance in your business and your brand, something's wrong and you're usually not in alignment. So my biggest recommendation I'll say, especially when you're thinking about standing out, is number one, going back to those core values, right? Like what makes you different? What are your authority markers? Maybe you have, X amount of years of corporate experience or, X amount of people you served over the last few years, but what are those authority markers? What makes you different? Is this your process? Is this your approach? Is this your methodology? For example, there's tons of marketing, branding, and PR consultants and coaches out there. It's like a dime a dozen, right? You can go online and find, someone in an instant just by searching. But really, at the end of the day, people are investing because of you. So what is your unique factor there? For example, with us, like we embody white glove service and that is something that's so, so important to me. So client retention. So we take a very holistic view of marketing. Some people get really tactical and they're laser focused. So what makes you different? That's the biggest thing. And then when it comes to your visual and verbal, cues, right? When you think about what makes you different, this could be the flair in your copy, right? So maybe you have a really edgy tone, or maybe you're super sophisticated. When it comes to your imagery, I see a lot of people trying to assimilate, like we were talking about, like, doing similar brand shoots and things like that. How can you switch it up? How can you show your personality? I think that's the biggest thing. We're working right now with a physician who you'll never see wear a white coat in the office. is usually in very, relaxed medical or relaxed attire, right? And it comes down to the experience of creating this really incredible medical experience that's laid back and not so stuffy, if you want to say, right? So it's like the modern approach to medicine. So really just putting your own stake in the ground is key.
Yeah, it's so true. And something that I see so often is like everybody does the same CEO style photo shoots for their website. They've
Yes.
got the serious look and they're wearing the business suit. And like, you will never, ever in your lifetime find me in one of those. I literally turned down a multi six figure gig at one point because I would have had to have worn a suit. Like, it's not me. I am a flowy top, kind of bohemian looking person. That is my personality. That is who I am. I'm not changing that for anybody. And I'm sure not going to do these cheesy photo shoots where I try to look like an authority figure in this like suit jacket with serious poses. It's just not who I am.
Yeah.
But I see it so often. And I think that for some people, that is who they are. And if that's you, then that's exactly how you should show up in your photo shoot. But if it's not, don't be afraid to be you. I've had so many people
Exactly.
say nobody's going to take you serious if you're wearing like the flowy top and you kind of look like a hippie. And I'm like, I am kind of a hippie. It doesn't mean I'm not going to get somebody incredible business results. If they say no because I'm not wearing a business suit, then they are not my person.
I love that you mentioned that too, because, when I first came into owning my own business and coming into the online world, the white pantsuit, I think I probably was one of like the first people like to bring the white pantsuit online because like it was part of my identity. Like
Mhm.
I dressed that way. I felt powerful in that way. But also come to find it was kind of like a mask for myself that I had to kind of like allow myself to kind of pull the layers out from within. But I think too, when it comes down to, the pantsuit vibes or the fancy photo shoots, it's funny. I was just thinking about this the other day, how as women too, we put so much pressure. And I notice even too in the online space, like women invest so much in brand photo shoots. I'm talking thousands and thousands of dollars in brand photo shoots where you could go to a guy entrepreneur, a male entrepreneur, and they're probably wearing the same, t-shirt over and over and over, and they're not spending this. And I think too, there's also this dynamic I've noticed as well as with women is that there's almost this feeling of we have to prove. So we have to do these things. We have to keep up with the Joneses. And I hope at least if we're talking about this in this podcast, so we can empower other women that they don't need to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to your point, right? That strong brand is about embracing what makes you different. And so,
Exactly.
who are you and how do you show up in the world? And do your photos reflect what it's like to work with you, right? I am kind of fun and I'm joking around all the time. And that's just who I am. We're serious. We get a ridiculous amount of stuff done when we work together, but it's not dry and stuffy and boring. So, if I showed up in a dry, stuffy, boring, like suit photo, it wouldn't match the experience that somebody got when they worked with me either. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that that is important. So just think about all aspects of that. And I love everything that you're sharing.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so now let's tie this into those of us like us who have multiple businesses or multiple passions. And so it presents a unique challenge because we're talking about different things, or we may have different ways that we approach working with people, different segments of client base that we work with. So, how do you keep everything really clear? How do you keep things cohesive and not confuse people in your marketing or your branding or your messaging when you do have all these different businesses or different passions?
It's a fine balance. I'm not going to lie. It takes a lot of articulation and just strategy just to make sure that you are clear. And, when I first started my companies, everything was under my brand, which it was really easy back then because everything was under me. But I started to feel really restrictive within my own brand because I felt that everything then relied on me, right? Like all the marketing relied on me. And I hated that. So we started separating out our companies into different entities. So we have this Hudson Studio, which is our, I like to say Airbnb, but for creative space. So that's our creative space and event space. We have Haus, which is our community and network for women. That's where our programs lie, our master classes, and we have Consulting. And I separated them out for different reasons because when I noticed Consulting and Haus, they started to divide a little bit more. The target demographic was dividing. So the messaging had to divide. And now what I tell people, especially as you're balancing multiple brands, is you have to be very clear with your audience. So if you are, for example, thinking about separating out your brands, you want to bring your audience in for the ride. Share and create a narrative with them. Explain to them why you're actually separating them out and for what reason. Why is it important for them to know that? And if everything is under one brand right now and you're marketing to multiple different segments, you might realize that some of your segments might come in on different channels. So I talk about omni-channel marketing a lot. For example, with me, our larger consulting clients typically come through referral and through Google, right? Through Google and through our PR opportunities versus our group programs predominantly are coming through Instagram. So you really want to find out like what are the channels that these people are coming to you on and make sure when you're communicating on those channels, it is clear and is to that person. So that's the power of omni-channel. And when you're, marketing to multiple segments, I like to kind of take the approach of marketing maybe to the more sophisticated level person, because the other person who maybe is not there yet in their business still aspires to be at that level. So even if it's the same common thread, you can market to that higher level person.
That's such a great point, because something I noticed with myself is I would always kind of drop to the newest person in the room. If I was teaching a class and I had a lot of experienced people there and a couple newer people, I didn't want people to feel behind. So I would end up talking to the newer person. But what would end up happening is the more experienced person would feel like I was geared towards somebody newer. So it took me a while to realize that I need to talk to a certain level and only talk to that level. And it's anyone's welcome, but I don't need to drop what I'm saying or how I'm talking about things to somebody who isn't quite yet at that level. And I
Exactly.
think that's a journey that a lot of us go through. So I love that point.
Yeah, I think it's one it can be difficult, especially in the beginning too. But what you said as well, I think is really powerful, because even for myself too, we have clients that range from like brand new all the way up to seven figures, multiple seven figures plus. And I think taking the higher approach also like to that higher level person will open up the mind of the person who might be new and is saying, wow, like I actually should explore this area. Or I didn't think about this yet. So I think that's actually a really smart approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let's talk about PR and how that kind of fits into everything. So, how do you leverage PR to increase your visibility, to elevate your brand, and really to help yourself achieve those big goals, whether they're revenue goals or other goals that you have in your business?
PR is everything. And I'm not just going to say it to say that, but I've been personally leveraging PR since the beginning. And this is something that I tell clients. I don't care what level you're at, you should be preparing for PR in some capacity. So we really leverage social, email, and PR, and obviously referrals, but PR was a big one. And why? Because it's third party credibility, right? So it's an external company, platform, whatever, who is saying Hannah's trustworthy. Like you should work with Hannah, for example, right? And the scale of PR ranges. So there's probably some, if you're listening into this podcast episode, there's probably many of you who are already implementing PR in some capacity and don't even realize, right? Like by sharing social proof, sharing testimonials, responding back to, your community members on social, right? And there's some of you in here that might be wanting to pitch larger media outlets. So for me, I like to think of PR as another channel of inbound traffic. Think top of funnel. So inbound traffic, top of funnel, that builds brand awareness. And if done correctly, and if you repurpose it correctly, you can use that as an omni-channel approach. So for example, we had an article that we did in Forbes, this was a few years ago, and had a lot of great traction. I ended up sharing that same article on LinkedIn, and I tagged Sarah Blakely. That one article, then that post had 50,000 views organically, helped grow my following, helped grow my LinkedIn account. So you can think about how these pieces of content can help expand your visibility without paying for ad dollars.
Yeah, I love that, especially today where ads are a little volatile. They're not working in the same way that they were before, as we're all trying to
Mm-hmm.
figure out how to how to work in this new world when it comes to ads, right? It's possible to get it to work and to get it to work well. I think we're still in a place where a lot of us are more figuring that out as things have changed so much. And it's very risky and very expensive on the ad front when you're not sure if you're going to get that return, or when your return is dwindling as you're trying to figure out and navigate this new landscape. So I
Exactly.
love that balance of focusing on PR as well, and that can help for inbound in the same way that ads could.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Brilliant. Awesome. All right. So let's talk a little bit about you and what you do and how you help companies. So tell us a little bit about yourself, about your three brands, and anything exciting that you have coming up.
So we always have something going on. I feel like this is also as a manifesting generator. If you're into human design, this just makes sense. I cannot do one thing at all. It's bad. So we have our full service consulting agency. And that's where if you're looking for me to come in and advise you, but also execute on a done for you fashion, we work with clients on that end. Usually they're either product, high level service based companies, or they're brands that are looking for or seeking VC funding. So we also work with several brands in the tech space too, which is really fun. And then Haus is our community and our network. So we work with women in all different ranges and capacities, but our whole mission is redefining the way that we live and work, which I love. So kind of merging the worlds together. And then we have our studio. But in terms of like what's upcoming and new things here, I can't share too much yet because we're working on something really fun for Haus. But we are enrolling for our flagship programs, which I'm really excited about. And we have some really fun retreats that are coming up as well. And those are going to continue as well. So we just have so many different ways, which I love with this brand. We have so many different ways that people can work and experience the companies, whether it's from a free standpoint all the way up to paid. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And that's something I worked really hard for.
Yeah, I love that. And that's really nice because you are supporting people at all of those different levels. And I like that you have ways where you can just keep deepening the results for people as they're leveling up their business and taking themselves and their brands to the next level as well.
Yeah.
So, absolutely brilliant. All right. So, there is a question I ask everybody, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say. And that is, how do you work smarter and not harder and keep things lean in your business?
Ooh, this is so good. So this is like story of my life. My big thing is I try to remove as many decisions from my plate as possible. And what I mean by that, and this goes for my personal life too. So I try to offload as many things and responsibilities to my team to also make them feel really empowered. So that way that my decisions and the things I'm working on are truly moving the needle in the company and are changing the trajectory on the vision. I always tell my team, I want them working on, the 3, 6, 12-month goals with me, but I'm thinking of 24 months. I'm thinking of 5 years, and I'm thinking, how are we getting there? So I think that's a big one, is just really delegating to my team and removing as many decisions as I can down to what I'm eating for dinner tonight.
Yeah, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I love that. And so, before we wrap up here, any final tips for how people can really focus on their branding, their marketing, and leverage PR to improve their visibility and elevate their business?
So one tip, this might not be a normal tip that you probably heard before, but go on a solo trip. Why do I say that? Because every brand goes through evolutions. We've gone through many, and we're about to go through another one. I feel like every year it's like we just keep doing it again and again. But what I have found is that anytime I have taken a solo trip, or at least if it's like a mastermind or with other women, just you get that space to disconnect. I have always had the best new ideas come from that. And that's my biggest recommendation when it comes to really defining your brand, is that your brand is kind of a living and breathing experience, right? It's always going to grow. It's not going to stay the same. But in order to build a brand that's intentional, it has to be reflective of you. And in order to be reflective of you, you have to go within first. So if you don't prioritize going within, and whether it's journaling, like I don't have it in front of me, but I have these sketch notepads that I buy from Target, and they're like the big notebooks that you like actually, design and draw art in. But actually I use that as my notebook because there's no lines in it. So it allows me to just be really creative. So go within first. That's my biggest tip. And surround yourself with other people. I think that's the biggest thing, especially, meeting you in Necker Island. Surround yourself with people who are thinking bigger than you always.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Hannah, thank you so much for being here. Share with everyone where they can find you and dive into all things in your world.
Yeah, so you can find me over on Instagram. We have multiple platforms, but you can find us over at HN Haus. And then if you go on our website too, hnhaus.com, you can toggle between all of our different sites. So the full service consulting and our studio as well. So everything is all really connected. And if you're not sure where to go, not sure where to get support, just send me a DM. I will probably voice memo you back.
Fantastic. All those links will be below in the show notes. Hannah, you are incredible and brilliant. Thank you for sharing all of your expertise and tips with the listeners today. Everyone, we will see you again next week.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Lean Out Your Business podcast. I hope you got a lot of value and actionable insights from today's show and would love if you take a moment to leave us a review. If you have any questions on today's episode or on how to lean out your business, join us over in our private Facebook community where every week we do live training and Q&A, and I'd love to have you be part of the conversation. Head to leanoutmethod.com/group to join us. And before you go, be sure to subscribe to the show so you're the first to know when we release a new episode. We'll see you next week.